Listen. You are now listening to the Brothers Mahoney. This is Michael.
And I am James.
And today we are discussing The Shadow of the Scourge, which is the 13th Big Finish release in the main range and written by Paul Cornell, who's somewhat of a big name in Doctor Who. It was released in October of 2000 and it runs a bit of a longer story. It's about 2 hours and 10 minutes. And it features a 7th Doctor with Ace and Professor Bernice Summerfield. And it's actually the first time that either James or I have been introduced to Summerfield, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. And the plot straight from the Big Finish website. The Pine Hill Crest Hotel in Kent is host to 3 very different events: a cross-stitch convention, an experiment in time travel, and the summoning of the Scourge. The Doctor, Bernice, and Ace find themselves dealing with a dead body that's come back to life, a mystical symbol that possesses its host, and a threat from another universe that's ready for every trick the Doctor's got up his sleeve. This time, has the Doctor gone too far?
I mean, he went to Kant this kind of far.
I actually might look it up on a map in the UK to see exactly where Kant is, because I don't know.
I'm sure it's right next to London.
Yeah, I pretty much everything's in London. Let's be real, bro. But the important cast as far as there is in this one, we have the 7th Doctor, naturally voiced by Sylvester McCoy, Ace, voiced by Sophie Aldred, Bernice Summerfield, voiced by Lisa Bowerman. I'm assuming that she's also the same one who does her own audio range.
Yes, I'm almost positive she is. And also, she looks very much like the actress they got to play the mother of Ruby in the ending of the last Doctor Who season so far. There's a lot of people online who are like, "Wait, is that Bernice?" And it's not Lisa, but a lot of people said they look very similar.
Talk about some it's like the one bit of excitement you can get from that episode. Oh my God, is it Bernice Summerfield? We were denied that just because we didn't know her.
We were denied so much more.
Yeah. Then there's a character named Annie Carpenter, voiced by Harley King. She's sort of like one of those crystal psychic channeler type people that you sometimes see.
Yeah.
Oh, is she? We'll talk about that too briefly. Because honestly, though I'm going to list Carpenter and 2 other characters, it would be a stretch to honestly call them that important in my opinion, but it's okay.
They were around the entire time, but...
Yeah, they were around. But tell me, can you tell Michael Pembroke apart from Gary Williams?
No.
Honestly, I can't either. But there's a Michael Pembroke who is a scientist type guy, voiced by Michael Piccarelli. And then lastly, there's a Gary Williams. I'll be honest, I can't even remember. Was he like the guy who organized the convention or one of the people?
See, that kind of confused me, admittedly, because I can't tell if he screwed the crust hits people out of money or was it the convention people as a whole.
Yeah, honestly, it wasn't clear to me either. But like James said, he's around for pretty much the whole story. So he's here. And he's voiced by Nigel Ferris, who's actually, on a side note, he's done quite a bit for Big Finish. He has a bunch of credits and like some behind the scenes stuff. So he's actually sort of a big name in Big Finish. So that's sort of interesting. But I mean, his character is not particularly interesting. But what he did behind the scenes is worth mentioning.
Yeah, I'm sure we've seen his name a lot as we continue going through these.
Yeah. And before we actually jump into the story, I just wanted to discuss, I guess, a misconception I had. Like we mentioned earlier, we haven't seen any Bernice Summerfield stuff. She first popped up in one of the Voyage New Adventures. What was it, like Lava and War, I think?
Yeah, I think, which that would have been the 8th book in the series.
Yeah, so she first popped up in the 8th book of that series, and we haven't read any of the books in that series. And she also has her own little, I don't know if you would call it a range, but she has her own series on Big Finish 2, which we haven't listened to any of it because we just haven't been introduced to her. So this is our first introduction to Bernice Summerfield, and I sort of thought that this would be a story in which like Ace and the Doctor travel and they sort of run into Bernice Summerfield. They weren't traveling with Bernice, they just sort of run into Bernice. This story actually has the Doctor traveling with both Ace and Bernice. So I'm assuming it takes place at some point during the VNAs.
Indeed, it actually does. We'll get you the timeline later on in the show, as I'm sure our listeners are looking forward to. But this takes place just as a little preview, it takes place after the 27th book in the Voyage of New Adventures range, which is the very admittedly confusing sounding book, but onto the Owl Consuming Fire, which has, it looks like, the 7th Doctor with Sherlock Holmes, and a book within a book, and maybe none of it even happened. So that'll be fun.
It sounds like a VNA. To be fair, though, we haven't read any of that range of books. The only books we've read is like 2 VMAs, Wheel of Ice, and that's pretty much it, I think.
We're halfway through a book right now. But
Indeed.
we'll keep being a tight lid on that one for another couple of days.
Yeah, that's such a tight lid. Because people are banging down our doors looking to know what it is. But we are indeed halfway through a book right now. So that's coming up sooner than you might think. But anyhow, I sort of expected, and it doesn't particularly make a big difference, but I just expected Bernice Summerfield to be someone they ran into, as opposed to actually being a companion at the time. So I think that's sort of fun. And I think even if you haven't had any experience with Bernice Summerfield, I think she's a pretty easy character to, I guess, get into. She has sort of a fun personality. She's somewhat straightforward and bland a lot of the time.
Yeah, she's also quite irreverent as well. She just is talking all the time. Not all the time, but she talked pretty often about, oh, last time I woke up like this, I had just drunk all night, and things to that nature. In some ways, she comes across as a light hedonist, honestly. Like, she doesn't go full throttle, but I just get the sense that if you put her in a room with Dr. Eveline Smythe, they'll probably be able to get along, but Smythe makes cookies and stuff, and Summerfield just goes out to get drunk at bars, so...
Yeah, I'll say that Smythe, and I mean, it's related, both apparently professors. Now, I have no idea what Summerfield is a professor of, but maybe they'll find some common ground there. I think Bernice even had a line in either the 3rd or 4th episode, like, that life is all about getting joy, or something like that. Like, having fun is like the main purpose of life. It might have been during one of the astroplane scenes.
Well, that's easy for somebody like her, you say. And for the record, just because we don't have much experience with Bernice, she, of course, had her own book range, which was kind of came out of the asses of the 7th Doctor book range.
Yeah, so it's in a way sort of like a continuation of the Voyage of New Adventures.
And it's just interesting to note that she's apparently from the 26th century, so the 2500s. She's also apparently very popular to the fans of the book range.
And you can sort of see why with his personality. So when the Doctor, Ace, and Bernice first get to this hotel convention center, each of them are sort of sent to their own little meeting. The Doctor goes to the cross-stitching convention because he enjoys his cross-stitching, which on a side note, no idea what that is. I'm assuming it's sort of like crochet, only probably nothing like it, so come at me, bro. Ace is sent to a science-y thing. It's some type of like temporal accelerator, timey thing. It's science-y. It's exciting stuff. And just because the Doctor apparently hates Bernice, he sends her to this woman who is sort of, what's the word, channeling the god Om, and doing a lot of, like I said, I don't even know what you call it. Well, I know what I call it. I call it like con artist bullshit, crystal lady stuff. And to be fair, spoilers, but it's not. It's like spoilers, and that's sort of not spoilers. She sort of is a con artist, but she's also sort of not. So I'm not even sure if that's really spoiling anything. So
I mean, she's a con artist. She didn't realize she actually had some ability. And to be fair, I thought it was very presumptuous of the Doctor to say, "Oh, bring her along. Let's see what she can really do." When she literally knows she's not psychic, or at least she assumed she was a psychic. So what did the Doctor think she was going to do?
Well, he probably suspected early on that she actually was, just because she made, I guess, contact with the thing to begin with, which I guess low-level psychics can do.
I suppose.
Actually, now that I think about it, it's not too different from Abominable Snowman, because first ran into the great intelligence while on the astral plane or something like that. So
yeah, I guess you just sort of meditate in this universe.
Yeah, it sounds like a potentially bad idea. It just becomes some host to some parasitic alien.
Well, I mean, that's what sort of happened. Padasambhava sort of been in the astral plane, and the Scourge could have come, and the second Doctor could get to meet them.
That would have added a little extra flair. So yeah, Bernice is sent to this little channeling group with a bunch. It seems like it's a bunch of like middle-aged women who want to talk about the losses they suffered and get some reassurance and that type of stuff. And yeah, Bernice Summerfield has a hard time fitting in.
See, I would like to think that Eveline would be able to fit in a lot easier, and on some ways I think she could. But I also think she'd probably have basically the same feelings on this group as Bernice does.
Well, I would sort of hope most professors, like if you're like academically inclined and you're like a literal professor, unless you're like some maybe theology professor, I guess. But I would imagine like most professors, if you're in either like the history or the hard sciences, would ideally have a similar reaction. That's not really the demographic that those types of people are trying to reach out to. It's more like the housewives, and honestly, it seems like it's mostly women, but some men get into it too. But yeah, it just seems. Well, it's not I wouldn't be the ideal demographic either, so.
Yeah, suffice to say, we would never go to one of these things.
I am a Scorpio, though, so it's just typical Scorpio stuff.
Jesus.
I know. But I will say, having not experienced Bernice Summerfield before, I think she's fun. She seems like she has a good personality. She's often snarky. And I think she also got along pretty well with Ace. Now, I'm not sure if she and Ace have different enough personalities to, I don't know, it's sort of hard for me to, I guess, see characters like that. But I would say Ace and Bernice seem like they're pretty similar, actually.
Well, I mean, they have spent a lot of time together. Now, it is interesting to note that this would have been one of the first times that these three are playing off each other and recording. Granted, I guess I don't know how Big Finish records things. They could do it in a way where literally they're all in separate rooms, and that's very possible. But at the very least, it will be the first time they're all in an audio thing together. So it helps that they do actually seem to have good chemistry, especially as you were saying, Bernice and Ace.
And I forget, did you say that Ace at this point, or was it mentioned that Ace was traveling with the Doctor for like 10 years by this point or something like that?
I mean, I keep in mind, if you were to talk about her chronology, like it's very complicated because she has at least 4 different chronologies. She had this whole issue where she might have died, but then she didn't die, but she could have died, and she did die, but then she also didn't die again.
I guess it happened to the best of us.
There are literally references. I forget exactly how the book's phrased, but in one of the books, it explains that there's just a lot of timeline shenanigans with Ace during this time. So it's kind of hard to tell how long she's been traveling with the Doctor, but it has been for a while, yes.
Yeah, and she does come across, she does come across as a little more experienced. I mean, she's still, I don't know, she has a youthful exuberance. But there is at one point, lady in this toy, with the Scourge, and it's this alien species that's trying to sort of come into the universe that Earth is in. They come from their own universe. They actually have, on a side note, some good speech patterns, which we'll touch on shortly. But they sort of have a thing where they can get most humans to listen to what they say, and sort of, I don't know if you want to say mind control, it's not quite mind control. I guess it's effectively mind control.
I mean, but how did the Doctor phrase it? That they could control the auditory. I mean, he explained it a lot more fancy than I can remember. But basically, if you hear them say something, you kind of have to do what they say. You don't have much option. You lose control over your body, and your body does as they command.
Yeah, so Ace comes up with the beautiful idea of actually making herself deaf, like busting her eardrums and making herself deaf so she would not be impacted by the Scourge, so she could effectively attack them. Sort of fool them and attack them. So she gets a character to actually like slam their hands down on her ears, which even listening to it just sounded painful AF. Like, that sounded painful. And from that point on, like for the last 2 episodes of the story, Ace is deaf, she's speaking louder. It leads to some pretty funny lines where she's sort of just repeating what's already been said, but she can't hear.
Yeah, no, it sounded extremely painful. I don't need to hear that again. And furthermore, one of the reasons she was so willing to do it was because she just either assumed, or I suppose maybe she has experience now, that, the TARDIS has healing abilities. The Doctor just be able to fix her up when she gets to the TARDIS, and everything's over.
It actually reminds me, this is funny, I've made this comparison before, it's been a while, but Ace sort of reminds me in a way of Clara. Or I guess it's probably vice versa. Claire reminds me of Ace. Like in Face of Raven, Claire just assumed the Doctor was going to be able to fix everything at the end. And naturally he wasn't. But the assumption is that Ace just assumes that the TARDIS is just going to fix her problems. And she just willingly gets herself... It strikes me as a bit presumptuous. And also, more than that, somewhat dangerous. But
I mean, it might be presumptuous, but keep in mind, this is after 27 books in the new range. So maybe she's seen evidence of that before.
Yeah, but just because it's worked before doesn't mean it's guaranteed to work again. It
has been before, so why can't it be now?
I guess that's a fair point. You can't argue with that.
And speaking of which, see, this take Claire made her, she just got killed by a board, according to the toy maker, so...
That's really all it was.
But I also enjoyed Ace near the beginning of this. Well, I suppose we want to lead into what the Doctor gets up to first, but Ace has a very hilarious reaction to something the Doctor does early on in this story. And I'll mention that when we get to the Doctor's part in this.
Yeah, which will be shortly. I just want to discuss the Scourge briefly. Like I said, there's sort of this alien species who is trying to make their way into the universe that Earth is in. And they seem, certainly they have a personality to them.
They're very arrogant creatures.
You're not wrong.
I'll also have to point out that the cover for this Big Finish release, which I'm sure we're showing periodically during this discussion, it lies. Because on the cover, these creatures do not have antenna, but if you actually listen to the story, they have antenna. So, false advertising. Come at me, Big Finish.
Listen, it is not false advertising.
Oh, okay.
So there you go. The power of the listen. It seems like they start every other sentence with listen, and they go on with the command. It's so funny. It's a nice little verbal tick. In fact, there's a line early on that I really appreciated. It's like in the opening sequence of the story. One of the Scourge is sort of taking or trying to control Annie. She's a psychic type woman. But the Scourge is saying, you can move your heart, but only to look at me. And it's that type of, I don't know, superiority that just makes himself I think they're going to be a decently memorable species, to be honest.
I mean, you'd say that, but how many decently memorable species out there that we don't remember? Like,
Listen, I will remember the Scourge.
Well, I don't know if that works on themselves, but like, do you even remember the things that were in? Well, I was going to say Land of the Dead, but even ignoring Land of the Dead, Winter for the Adept.
Winter for the Adept had like poltergeists. No.
I mean, it wasn't really poltergeist. That was actually just a confluence of psychic energy from 3 different people in the house.
It's the same idea.
They weren't the aliens.
I do know Land of the Dead had like these giant dinosaur type things though, so.
Yeah, they're like resurrecting these dinosaur bones.
I do think the Scourge is more memorable just by the nature of their verbal tics and their arrogance.
They might be. They're also a little confusing to me because, one, they're apparently one of the bases for human belief in demons, which, like, whatever. I'm sure there's 2,000 alien species in Doctor Who.
Well, I mean, that's a good point. Like, they get the power from, like, the fear and despair of humanity. Well, I guess probably not just humanity, but I would imagine other species.
Yeah, but they also seem to, quote-unquote, cast that fear and despair, which, of course, is a nice feedback loop for them. The more fear and despair they cast. And literally every now and then the episode one of them would just run off, terrorize people so there's more fear.
And not just terrorize, but also torture. I mean,
yeah, torture people.
There's a lot of violence. I mean, this is just purely audio, but there's a lot of violence being described on screen. Like, I think at some point someone gets decapitated. People are literally being tortured in front of other people just to increase the amount of fear and panic, because that sort of gives the Scourge more power. So it's a decently violent story at times. And that sort of leads into the whole fact that this is largely set up by the Doctor as a way to sort of prevent the Scourge from coming to Earth to begin with. Like, he sort of sets this whole thing up as a way to ideally stop the Scourge for good. So, yeah, the first 2 episodes, pretty much everything goes to his plans. Then things go off the rails a little bit.
Yeah, so the 7th Doctor in the Virgin New Adventure reigns often came up with these whole complicated plots to get his way. And I mean things, we could set things up like a decade in advance. I only know this because I was looking through some of these preludes to the novels, which were published in Doctor Who magazine. But there is a prelude to one of the novels where he leaves Ace, wherever he leaves Ace, she's fine, but he's just going off for a little bit. He runs a building someplace in Edwardian London or something to that effect. He lives there doing whatever he's doing for 2 years. Then he goes back to Ace and tells Ace he's just been gone a few minutes. How to set up a plan he had coming up later in the book. Like, this is a guy who has foresight. And in a lot of ways, this is a Doctor who's probably just as arrogant as the Scourge are. But perhaps the Scourge are able to pour one over him.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's almost one of the points. Like, the Doctor has this detailed plan. It's fun. At the end of the first episode, the Scourge is sort of possessing the body of a guy who was previously deceased. So this dead body rises. Scourge is talking through the body. And the Doctor's like, oh, am I addressing the Scourge? And then he goes on to say, on behalf of the Time Lords of Gallifrey, I welcome you to this universe and all these humans that you are allowed to feast on. He even has like a document typed up so they can go over like the official terms of this and such. So yeah, it's like he's selling out humanity, giving them to the Scourge. Somewhat similar actually to Invasion of Time, where it seems like he's just betraying them to the mysterious aliens, but there's certainly more to it probably.
Yeah, and this is where the hilarious line from Ace comes in, because Ace just says, I forget exactly how she said it, but, oh, Doctor, you're betraying us to these aliens! And then she just runs off. And then we later see her at the beginning of episode 2 meeting up with Bernice, and she's like, oh yeah, the Doctor just had the document, and I just played along, just said that he betrayed people. You know how it is, Bernice. And it was just pretty funny that she's obviously been around with this Doctor. I mean, if you're going to be around this Doctor for more than a year, you know how he does things. Like, we saw what happened to her in the course of Fenric, and I doubt she's forgotten that lesson.
Yeah, that's what makes this Doctor, and we've said it before, but that's what makes the Seventh Doctor among one of our favorite Doctors. Just that he's willing to hold things back from companions, he's willing to lie, almost anything to, I guess, complete his plans. There's a scene in this where someone's being killed, and like Ace is watching in horror. It sort of switches over to the Doctor going over documents with this Scourge, just pointing out some small things and such, and it's sort of a funny juxtaposition. Like someone's literally being killed like a floor or two above him, and he's just sitting and doing some document stuff.
He's double checking some subsections.
Yeah. Like, because in the big scheme of things, he knows that what he's doing is, I don't just say more important than the individual's life. And I'm not sure exactly how he would phrase it. If you take the long view, what he's doing is probably more relevant than just that one person being killed. And it's something that you don't see. It's not like he was in the room ignoring the guy being killed. But he knew that the Scourge is terrorizing and killing people, and he just has this thing he's focusing on more, and it's just sort of interesting.
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, a couple of points. One, later on in the story, he said he didn't want anybody to get killed, and I don't know how he thought that was going to happen. Like, he can say that all he wants, but he was dealing with... They'll call this Scourge for a reason. I don't know to tell you. It's not God. But, so ignoring that high hope he had, he's very similar in a lot of ways to the 10th Doctor and the 12th Doctor. The 10th Doctor more so during the Time Lord victorious time in his life, and the 12th Doctor more towards the beginning, where, no, he wasn't saving him, he was saving themselves. It's kind of what the 7th Doctor seems like a lot of time. He seems very unjustified the means, which isn't even a philosophy I'm completely opposed to, but I think the 7th Doctor is one of the Doctors who might be the closest to you could see them being evil. Like, the 6th Doctor, for all of his bluster and whatnot, he's obviously outraged against things that are against the people and is always on the side of good. Whereas the 7th Doctor is somebody who would probably work with a Dalek for half a story just to betray them at the very end.
That's actually a good point, because some Doctors I don't think they just wouldn't be willing to work with species like that. And I could just imagine, like, the 3rd Doctor having some difficulties, for instance. Like, some Doctors just might not have the flexibility. But if you need to do something terrible in the long run to fix something, I mean, the 7th Doctor would be the Doctor you'd want to do that.
Yeah, I don't think there's been a Doctor before, really since, who has ever quite planned like this one has. I mean, they might have went a bit overboard in this one, because they did mention Sass at least 3 or 4 times. Maybe it's just 2 times. And that was a big motif for the 7th Doctor in the Voyage and New Adventures, from what I've heard, that is that he was a chess player. And he's often compared to the TV trope The Chess Master, somebody who just watches the board, moves his players, gets his pieces into place, and then makes his moves. And that's exactly what this 7th Doctor was planning. He was just lazily walking through a hotel with these killer insects because he had a plan already in place, and he wasn't even worried about it. He was literally not worried at all that his plan wasn't going to work.
Yeah, and then he gets turned into an insect, so to all things, it comes an end.
In everyone's life, a little rain must fall.
Even if it rains in the form of an extra limb.
And antennas that were not advertised.
Indeed. Listen.
Bitter.
Actually, it's on that note, this is an exceptionally small note, but along with the violence that we get in this episode, there's also a decent amount of body horror. Some of the characters like Annie and the Doctor actually have the body sort of transformed once the Scourge possesses them. It's not exactly clear what happens to the bodies, but like they grow extra limbs, and I imagine other things happen.
Antennas, praying, I don't know if they ever said praying mantis, but mantis faces, I think, as just how they're appearing. Because there was certainly Annie at one point asked why she was seeing them the way she was.
Yeah.
And that means that she was seeing them out of Mantis' eyes, which there are worse ways to see.
Yeah, so this some body horror stuff. I actually thought it was sort of Cronenbergish, who is not. I think he passed away recently, but David Cronenberg directed movies like Videodrome, Scanners.
The Fly remake.
Well, actually, yeah, Fly remake's probably one of the more memorable ones. I was going to go with They Came From Within / Shivers, which I imagine a lot of people might not know. But point being, he's pretty well known for that subgenre of horror / sci-fi. So this story at times reminded me a bit of that.
Which is kind of fun because that's actually a horror genre you don't even like very well, do you?
No, it's like among my top 5 least favorite subgenres of horror. And that's not its fault. I'm just not big into the whole body horror type stuff.
The funny thing is that, of course, body horror is a lot different in audio than it is in visual elements. Because obviously we hear the horrible sounds, perhaps, of skin ripping and whatnot, and maybe sloughing, although I don't remember any of that. But we never actually see the results, you just hear the results described. So it's only as bad as they're descriptive.
That makes it a lot more palatable, so luckily it's not really a detriment here. But I also wanted to bring up that once the Doctor sort of becomes possessed by the Scourge and sort of takes over his body, the Doctor sort of screws with it. He sort of allows it to possess him, but then I think he starts to sort of came in from behind it in a way, sort of intentionally shut his body down so that neither one has full control. And at that point, the Doctor sort of like doing a whole astral plane type thing where he has to like confront the Scourge in his mind. And it, of course, brought up images of the 3 Doctors with him fighting Omega. It's probably a little more epic. Well, it's probably supposed to be a little more epic, but that's sort of monthly what I was seeing.
Yeah, I mean, I think I could have sworn there was another part in the classic series where he might have been inside the Doctor's mind, but it is not coming to me. But either way, I'm sure it would have a very classy look if it was ever shown on screen. But as it is, it worked for what it was. There's kind of whispery there in the astral plane / in the Doctor's mind, but I think it worked out on the whole. Bernice was able to get there through Annie having actual psychic abilities that she didn't know about. And so Bernice was able to help the Doctor out with the issues she was having there. And in a lot of ways, I'm not going to say did it focus on this, but it's not what I took from it as much. But in a lot of ways, there's a character out for the Doctor to realize that he can be a better person than maybe this one sometimes acts.
Yeah, the ending did get a bit, I'm not quite sure what the right word would be, but it's like all about the power of friendship. Well, should I say all about the power of friendship? But the Doctor was like, oh, I would never have gotten through it if it wasn't for these good people around me. I guess it's not false, but it just came across as a bit, oh God, fuck off.
Yeah, a bit corny. It reminded me of the end of the second Harry Potter game, The Chamber of Secrets, on PC, where if you haven't seen it, no one's ever going to get the reference, but it mentions that they got through the power of friendship and loyalty, but mostly friendship. And it's just one of those things you expect to see in a kindergarten show. And I get that this isn't a kindergarten show. People lost their hearts. There were at least 2 people forced to strangle themselves, 1 to death. A lot of good things happen. Somebody almost got thrown off the top of a building. These things happen, but usually not in kindergarten shows. So I'm not saying it's that bad, but the ending was a bit too nice, I guess, for me. But besides that, on the whole, it was fine.
Yeah, I guess one of my main complaints, I don't know, complaint might be a bit strong, but just going back to these other characters, I guess you could say Annie did have enough character to her. Like, there's a whole thing with her being pregnant and the fact that the guy she was in a relationship with was married. We actually find out who that is later. It's actually a character we've been introduced to already. So Annie herself, I guess, has some character. But then you get people like this Michael Pembroke and Gary Williams, who are literally with the Doctor, Ace, and Bernice at different points throughout the whole story. And even toward the end, I couldn't tell Michael and Gary apart. And you really shook because one's like a scientist type guy, one's like, I don't know, convention / cross-stitching guy who's Tom Annie. Theoretically, you should be able to tell them apart. To be fair, maybe other people could. I just couldn't. And I just never got the sense of great character distinguishing factors from them. Yeah, I'll just say that that's probably one of my bigger issues with that. That aside from the 7th Doctor, Ace and Bernice, everyone's interchangeable. And that includes a Scourge, by the way. There's like 3 different Scourge, but to be honest, it doesn't really make a difference because they're all sort of the same.
They're a hive mind, so it really doesn't make a difference.
Yeah, they may have been a hive mind. I just think it's strange. I think one was officially called like a leader and one was like a Dama leader. Like, if you're going to be a hive mind, why even have titles? But
because
yeah, I guess
titles have to breed titles.
It is some Littlefinger logic.
Speaking of chess masters.
You ate line. But I would say that was my main issue with the story. To be honest, it's actually like 2 hours and 10 minutes, so it's a bit long anyway. But it might have gone down a little easier if some of these other characters had a bit more in the way of like personality and character traits. They were recognizable as such.
Yeah, I didn't have as much trouble telling them apart. I just didn't care to because I'm not convinced either of them really mattered all that much.
Well, I mean that's not wrong either.
It's one of those things where if there's somebody in a episode of Doctor who is around for a long time, but they don't really do anything, but they're just around as a background character, I mean, that's fine, and that doesn't even feel strange. But of course, because I would assume more money is paid into the episodes than Big Finish, although maybe with the classic series, that's not as guaranteed. But of course, if you're going to do an audio thing, you have to pay for every voice actor you use. Ergo, you're not going to want to use too many quote-unquote extra voice actors. So any voice actor you have, maybe they'll have a secret that gets revealed in episode 3 or 4. Like, all of them are going to mean more than the average background character, maybe a military person who appears in five episodes of a 6-parter. It's very different to be a background character in an audio than it is to be a background character in the show. I think that might be part of the issue, like the matter of perspective.
Yeah, they naturally try to get the utility out of the people they have there. Before we get on our final thoughts on this one, though, did you have to go over the timeline stuff?
Not really.
Listen, you will do the timeline now.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Mr. Scourge. I shall do the timeline. Sounds like a very good idea. As listeners to the show know, the TARDIS Wiki has a personal timeline for each Doctor, including the extensive extended media, ranging from the comic books, comic strips, Big Finish, and BBC audio, the multiple book ranges, and everything in between. Doctor Who canon, insofar as it actually has one, is a jumbled mess and has been forever. So I just like to see where the stories we're discussing fit into the universe as a whole, as continuity in the narrative timeline, as always been of interest to me in the media I consume. So this, like we were saying earlier, in a general sense, it takes place after the 27th book in the Voyager New Adventures range, Our Consuming Fire. But to place it more specifically, according to the TARDIS Wiki timeline, which for the record, amazing site, make sure you use the right one, and I have not done a single thing on this timeline. I haven't written anything. I just report the lovely information we get from it. So basically, they've done all the work, and we just recite it. But what more could one want? Right before this story, according to the timeline, is Question Mark Pajamas, which is a short story that was published in Decalogue 2, Lost Property, which came out July 1995. And of course, the Decalogue series was the precursor to the Short Trips series that BBC and then later Big Finish did, being published by Virgin, who also, of course, was doing the 7th Doctor New Adventures and the Missing Adventures. There were 5 Decalogues as a whole. Only the first 3 of them involved stories with the Doctor, and the last 2 were after they lost the rights to the Doctor, so it had tertiary characters related to the Doctor Who universe. So if you ever want to buy us a Decalogue, you can send it our way. Well, thank you. We do not actually have any yet. I almost bought some, but yeah, we still do not have any. But this was from the second Decalogue. And for the record, they all, on the whole, the first 2 sound quite interesting. Right after this was The Last Word, which was a 7th Doctor one-part comic strip published in Doctor Who magazine issue 305, which came out May 2001. Now, this comic strip was, at this point, 2001, all the Doctor Who magazine strips were in full color. But of course, 2001 was during the time of the 8th Doctor having comic strips. But they took a little break from the 8th Doctor comic strips, which lasted for a long time, by the way. I mean, I think it lasted from the movie to when Christopher Eccleston started playing the Doctor. So 96 to 2004. In some ways, the 8th Doctor has a lot more comic stories of worth than almost any other Doctor, because I'm not sure how worthy some of those TV comic things are. But, nonetheless, this happened to have been, I think it was the 10th anniversary of the first 7th Doctor New Adventure. So in honor of the 10th anniversary, they let the comic story this month in issue 305 be a 7th Doctor story instead of an 8th Doctor one. And apparently it's a very kind of nudity-heavy story based from the loom of the New Adventures. Basically meaning if you haven't read the New Adventures, you might not understand anything that happens in it or is referenced. But that is what makes it fun. But yeah, so that's just where this takes place. There's actually another Big Finish main range audio with the Doctor, Bernice, and Ace. And that one takes place after this one. I forget what that one's called, but I'm sure I'll get to it when we get to it. I think literally Bernice only shows up in 2 of the monthly main range Big Finish audios, which is kind of interesting when you think about it. But I suppose she had her own audio range even before the Doctor did. She was doing her own thing, probably getting her money from that mostly. So it all works out.
But when it comes to the Shadow of the Scourge as a whole, I generally thought it was a decent story. It's not one that I think I'm going to be that interested in re-listening to. Like, there's a handful that I actually might, at some point, want to take the time to revisit. I guess with this one, a lot of the characters didn't seem as fleshed out as they could have been. And also at 2 hours and 10 minutes, it's just a bit long in the tooth. It's a bit more than I really want to spend time with again. That said, I really did like Bernice Summerfield. I was a bit worried because I think James mentioned somewhere that she's like a proto-River Song. I'm like, oh god, I don't really want another River Song type woman. And that's not necessarily a dig at River Song. I just feel that she gets a bit old after like seeing her twice, but you know, whatever. And I also have worried that it might be one of those situations in which her personality is like pretty much the exact same as River Song's. And there's certainly some similarities. But the fact that Bernice Summerfield doesn't seem like she wants a piece of the Doctor makes it at least different enough. And overall, I think she's snarky and has at least an individual enough personality to keep her pretty interesting throughout.
I mean, it sounded like she wanted a piece of the 8th Doctor.
And that's actually a good point. There's actually a reference to Paul McGann's 8th Doctor in this story. It's during one point in the astral plane. And I found that sort of amusing because this is what the 13th was in the main range. So it's before there's been any Big Finish 8th Doctor stories. So I think it's sort of funny they're sort of referencing his Doctor before they were able to actually use him.
Yeah, and that's why it was done so obliquely, but I thought it was kind of funny that apparently Bernice thought the 8th Doctor was quite attractive. She was asking the Doctor, oh, so you're going to become him? And the 7th Doctor's like, not in some time, I don't think. So that was kind of funny. Yeah, for me, my thoughts are on the whole mostly the same. There's one thing that, and we might not have mentioned it in the past, obviously we've been doing these audios on the whole rather slowly in discussing them because, well, one, we're trying to discuss a lot in the Doctor Who universe and there's a lot to discuss. And so we're not quite as focused on just doing the audios. But another reason that we're getting through them a little slower is, one, it's still something we're not quite as used to, and I'm sure we're more used to it now than we were. But we never grew up listening to the radio and whatnot, at least listening to a narrative story being told on the radio. And we also don't exactly have long work commutes. My workplace is 5 minutes away. It's not like I can pop up the Big Finish audio app, which, by the way, the app is rather good. I wish it had some other features, but I do quite like the app. But it's not like I can just put the app on and listen to half an episode as I'm walking to work, because, again, it's a 5-minute walk. There'll be literally no point to it. And that's not a way to listen to a story. So the way that we listen to these stories is we just pull it up on the computer and then we let it play. We don't do anything. We just sit and listen and have some conversation when something happens. And that is not always the most enthralling time, even if the story is a good one, even if we're quite enjoying where the story is going. So it's not something we do every day. It would be hard pressed for me to want to do every day, to be honest, even if we would get through these faster. And this story it didn't keep my interest as much as some of the other ones do. And I don't think it was bad, but I do think a lot of it had to do with what Michael was saying, that the characters, the side characters, just were terribly interesting to me. Like, all of them did this thing that made them feel bad, that made them feel like, oh, we should get Scourge, because that's part of how the Scourge work. They make you feel despair, and then, because they're there, you think, oh, we deserve this. But, ooh, this guy stole, what, £1,000? Who fucking who? I literally don't care. Like, did he do a bad thing? Maybe. I don't know what his life was like. Maybe he needed the money more than the event organizers did. Who am I to say whether that was a bad thing or not? This one person cheated on his wife. Yeah, he should probably break up with his wife. Like, break up with her. Don't cheat on her. Stop being a dick. Yeah, he sucked in that regard. But it was so strange because at the end of the story, one of the nights during the happy moment, the guy's like, yeah, I'm going to leave my wife and I'm going to get you this woman I've been cheating on her with. And it's played as a happy moment. And yes, it's better than still cheating on her. But something about that just rings so wrong to me.
Like, yeah, I thought the same thing. It's just sort of, that's the type of thing I mean, like you said, it's obviously the best thing to do. It's the best thing to do to leave the woman you don't love and get with the woman you do and stop screwing over the woman you're married to. But at the same time, playing it off as some happy moment just seems sort of laissez-faire.
Yeah, it's a situation you're forced into. Well, it's a situation you force himself into, not a situation you're happy about. So I don't know, that just sat wrong with me. But on the whole, I didn't care much about the sins of these people. I didn't find any of them particularly, oh my golly, I would novel. Like, I wasn't interested. Were we the mystic was a con artist? Who could have guessed? It's not like the Randy Foundation has been active for 20, 30, 40, 50 years and hasn't once discovered a single real case of any of this being true. Like, yeah, she was going to be a con artist. Yes, I suppose she could have thought she had the abilities and she didn't, which happens. But it's much more likely she was just going to have been a con artist anyway, and lo and behold, she was. So, again, what a surprise. I don't know, just the action characters didn't do much for me. I quite enjoyed the Seventh Doctor's passing in the first 2 episodes. I thought his whole attitude was completely hilarious. He's like, oh yes, here's a contract. Let's look at this class which says what you can and can't do to the humans of Earth and why we might or might not be able to just tap you and blah, blah, blah. And that was pretty funny. They literally had a written out contract. But on the whole, there are stories that I've re-listened to Big Finish Watch. I'm not saying I wouldn't re-listen to this one, but I don't really want to sit around for 2 hours and 10 minutes just to listen to this one. I do have a lifespan that is probably not going to be more than 80 years. So
I was going to say, if I make 60, I'll be so surprised. I mean, that's just me.
I hope that you make a little more than that. But yeah, I don't know. I have other things to do with my time, and re-listening to this is frankly not going to be one of them. It's not a bad story. I like the Seventh Doctor. I liked Ace. I really enjoyed Bernice. I thought this was a very nice introduction to the type of woman she is, the type of character she is. And the Scourge were fun, if not a little convoluted at parts.
Listen.
But you did give me a command.
No, I was just saying listen.
Oh,
It'll be part
okay.
of my new thing now.
Oh, I can't wait till you talk about the Doctor Who episode, Listen, and we have to say it that way.
Yeah, it's gonna be a good time. Be ready, guys. Yeah, so overall, this one might be described as maybe, I don't know, potentially underwhelming. And even if it's not underwhelming, maybe at the very least not one of the better ones. There's some that I legitimately enjoyed, some that I had some more issues with. Like, for instance, the apocalypse element. I just found that one, and that was another one of the longer ones, if I recall. But I found it generally not exactly engaging for most of it. I think this is better than that one, but it's not one of the better ones. And it's certainly, I don't know, I just don't know if it's going to be particularly memorable later on, aside from some elements I've enjoyed, but that's just me.
Well, speaking of things that probably are going to be very memorable, what do we have coming up next?
Yeah, you're at LAN. So we like having a bunch of random stuff as we sort of discussed during the timeline, and there's a lot of random stuff in Doctor Who. Once before we have talked about the comic strip, which was the second Doctor and the Nightwalkers. So up next we have another comic strip from TV Comic, this one featuring the third Doctor. And I don't think he has a companion in this one, but I don't really know. But the comic strip is just titled The Disintegrated. And I believe it's, 10 pages?
Yes, it's 10 pages. It came out February through March 1974. And just for a little setup, TV Comics, or TV Comic, if you don't recall, was a weekly British comic, which came out once a week. So most stories were told in a serialized form, maybe with just 2 pages a week, and that's how the story is told. So even though this went through a whole month, this was only a 10-page story.
And I'm assuming it's black and white, yes?
Oh yeah, TV Comic never did anything in color, at least not that I know of.
So yeah, next up is just a 10-page comic strip with the third Doctor. Don't really know anything about it, but hopefully it's, I don't know, something. The Nightwalkers has its own memorable portions, but to be honest, I suspect a lot of the older ones won't be that sad should it judge it until we read it.
I suppose we so, though I do get the feeling a lot of these are not going to feel very Doctor Who-ish.
Yeah, but I guess we will see. So, if you have listened to Shadow the Scourge, you have any thoughts on this one, by all means leave a comment below or reach out to us on Twitter at Brothers Mahoney. But as always, you have been listening to us. This is Michael.
And I've been James.
We hope you enjoyed your time with us. Thanks for listening, and have yourself a nice night. Listen, like, and subscribe, as the kids say. All the cool kids are doing it.
All the cool kids and all the cool Scourges. Have a nice night.